The Circus Circus is what the whole Hep world would be doing Saturday night if the Germans had won the war. Hunter S. Thompson.
Does Prole drift extend to travel choices? Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. We're going to bring back the discussion on Prole trip, but with a little bit different angle. Instead of pointing out different behaviors that people do that cause Prole drift or aesthetic choices, I'm going to be talking about people's travel choices and how where people choose to spend their free time is often a reflection of Prole drift. And so, how can a city have Prole drift? How can a vacation destination have Prole drift? A vacation place originally designed explicitly for working class and low income people begins to attract more tourism from people who previously considered themselves to be middle class or upper middle class because they got priced out of the traditional upper middle class and middle class vacation destinations. So, like an example is maybe a family will take a vacation to Las Vegas instead of to Disneyland because they've got priced out of Disneyland, and so they instead go to Vegas. And or say, for example, instead of having a beach vacation in the Florida Keys or Miami, they go to the Redneck Riviera or a place like Destin. As a result, those locations try to rebrand themselves to their own marketing, and from the visitors who go, they're saying, "Oh, it's not as poor or it's not really trashy. It's actually a place on the rise that's actually a middle class luxury." And so that's kind of how this happens. The same downward social mobility that causes Prole drift influences travel. So, what historically was like a Prole travel destination? There's a few things in common that make them different from traditional middle, upper middle class, or older new money travel destinations. One example would be the duration of the trip. Popular vacation destinations that are associated with Prole drift are very common for people to visit for just a few days versus a week or two. They're often within a few hours' drive of major population centers, or now in the era of budget airlines like the EasyJets, the Ryanairs, and the Allegiants of the world, maybe an hour flight. And so, as a result, because the distances are short, you don't need to spend as long as a time there. You could spend maybe instead of a week, maybe 2 to 3 days. And the reason why this is important because a lot of people can't afford whether it's just time off work or the hotel stay or lodging stay for more than 2 or 3 days. So instead of a 2 week European trip or elite resort, you do these 3 day luxuries instead. Another example is the type of crowds that go to these. One crowd that is maybe not conventionally people would think on firsthand, but makes a lot more sense when you dive into it, that goes to a lot of these more, for lack of a better term, Prole destinations are college students. There's a big overlap between where college students like to travel and working class people like to travel because college students are often very low income, if not no income. And so if they want to go someplace for their spring break, affordability is a major driver of their choices. Popular spring break or college getaway places started as affordable travel destinations for the mainstream population and then got adopted by the college crowd over time. Another one too that's popular among these destinations is vice-oriented tourism. Since a lot of the vices that are popular among the working classes are popular in people of all classes who want to seek these particular vices at the most cost-effective way possible, you see that become part of the brand and marketing of these destinations. You'll see a common pattern. A lot of the cities I mentioned are these places either started as vice-oriented tourism locations or are still vice-oriented tourist locations to this day. So that kind of explains the general context of the type of places we're going. And so now we're going to go through the map around the world of where these places are. I've color coded the Prole Drift travel destinations in purple to contrast the red and the gold that I used for the new and old money travel destinations, respectively. And like I did in the previous series, we're going to start with the west coast of North America because I'm most familiar with this. Not every Prole Drift travel destination is a bad place. I have been to a few of these myself, and there are people who all classes who do go to these partially due to the convenience and how quick of a getaway you can have relative to having a more expensive and elaborate trip usually required for some more of the other vacation destinations. But I have noticed a lot of these observed patterns through my lived experience and research on this subject, and I'm going to point them out. We're going to start with California, and California has three notable locations that have been a byproduct of Prole Drift tourism. And the first two are on the Central Coast. I'm going to start with Paso Robles, which was just an agricultural area that people drove through to Santa Barbara or San Francisco on the 101. But in recent years has evolved to becoming kind of its own destination in its own right, kind of a more affordable version of Napa or Sonoma, where people have kind of been priced out of that, or Santa Barbara to a lesser extent. So that's kind of where Paso Robles fits in. It used to be kind of a very working class, low income agricultural community, and now is trying to rebrand itself due to middle class tourists, the more famous wine country, as an alternative to Napa and Sonoma. And the other destination is Pismo Beach, known as the affordable beach town closest to a lot of Central Valley cities such as Bakersfield and Fresno, and has since kind of rebranded to being more of a middle class place, are going here for their getaway and not previously just the working class. You can see when you go to Pismo Beach a little of its original more low income demographic, but you do see upscale tract developments on the other side of the 101. So it's in the process of trying to upbrand itself, but at the same time, it's still not attracting the more upscale crowds such as Santa Barbara. So if you had to Paso Robles as the alternative to Napa, Pismo Beach is kind of the alternative to Santa Barbara. And then in Southern California, there's another Napa knockoff, which is Temecula. Temecula started as an exurb for both Orange County and San Diego for people who wanted larger houses than they could afford in dense coastal areas in Orange County and San Diego. In the last decade, Temecula has rebranded as a wine country getaway for people who live in Southern California who just can't make the trip to Napa or Italy or any of these other typical wine country type places, and they can have a short 1 hour drive and have their wine country getaway in Temecula or hot air ballooning. Temecula is not considered an upscale travel destination, but a lot of people kind of present it that way as kind of a cope for the fact they can't go to the actual ones. And next, outside of California, we're going to go south to Baja California in Mexico and Sonora, where you have a lot of Mexican tourist destinations which would not really be visited if it wasn't for their affordability. On the coast, you have the northern part of Baja California, from Tijuana in the north to Ensenada in the south. These places started as working class, vice tourist focused locations, and there's still some elements of that to this day. Similar to Paso Robles and Temecula, they've made an effort to try to rebrand and upscale, and you're starting to see more tourist attention from middle and upper middle class places. The cheapest cruise destination that you can take from Long Beach is going to Ensenada. And so that's kind of one location that is particularly stands out because it has a little bit more respectability than the other cities here, whether it's Rosarito, Tijuana, or surrounding areas in northern Baja California. If you go a little bit further east, there's one other notable destination in this region that kind of fits as a Pearl Drift destination, and that is Puerto Penasco, or Rocky Point. Rocky Point stands out as the closest and most affordable beach to Metro Phoenix, so a lot of Arizonans would go there if they want to get out of the heat and enjoy the water. Traditionally, middle class Arizonans would go to San Diego or Orange County or Los Angeles, but particularly San Diego. So if San Diego is becoming increasingly out of reach for a lot of tourists from Arizona, Rocky Point has increasingly become a substitute. And that's not all for Mexico. We're going to go further south. Two other destinations stand out. One is Cabo, the closest flight distance really for a place that requires flying and is relatively safe compared to the rest of Baja California. And it originally, some parts of it, let's just San Jose del Cabo, started a little more upscale, but as generally Cabo San Lucas started as kind of a working class college party getaway type place. It still has that element, but again, as other travel destinations have gotten more expensive, it's kind of started to absorb more interest. Mazatlan has had an up and down history based on its perceived safety, but it's now branded as kind of the more affordable Cabo, and they are building new resorts there, but it still has a lot of personal safety concerns, which is why it's historically considered a Pearl Drift travel destination. Last but not least, in the western half of North America, we've got the area around the Colorado River Basin, with Las Vegas to the north. The Las Vegas Pearl Drift story is self-explanatory. Las Vegas has always kind of been regarded as like the affordable travel destination and is known for people going there for gambling and partying, and its relative affordability compared to similar resort experiences in other cities. And part of the reason Las Vegas is struggling this year is because Las Vegas went too far with the attempts to upbrand it and tried to think it really was like this upscale destination where people would pick going to Vegas instead of, say, going to Europe or going to San Diego or going to Miami or going to more these older new money vacation destinations that I've talked about previously. And they're kind of getting a rude awakening that really the main draw to Vegas was its relative affordability. When you take that away, people go elsewhere. If you're going to pay premium vacation prices, you have a lot of competition, probably more attractive than Las Vegas. And for those who are priced out of Las Vegas, there is Laughlin to the south, which is on the Nevada, where the Nevada border meets California and Arizona, branded as the more affordable Vegas. Fraternities and sororities go for their annual getaway. It's on the lake that borders that area and the Colorado River. It's always been more for budget travelers, retirees, working class, but as Vegas and other places got more expensive, it's attracted more people who felt themselves middle class. In the south, we got Lake Havasu, which is a similar story. It's historically a spring break place or a more working class place where people would rent houseboats and party boats. And now it's starting to attract a more middle class crowd, again, as other travel destinations, particularly those on the coast, have gotten increasingly more expensive. And so now we've covered really the West Coast. Now we're going to go to the Southeast. And I've noticed there's generally a trend that these areas tend to be in the South and the West because those are the more newly developed areas within the United States. And geographically, a lot of the vacation destinations in the Northeast were always originally designed for a wealthier crowd because before World War II and the GI Bill greatly expanded the middle class in America, tourism and vacations, especially also pre-air travel, was not really affordable or accessible to most of the population. So when they did build vacation destinations, they had to go up market. And so that's why there really isn't. Even the areas today that are considered the more working class vacation destinations, such as the Jersey Shore, Ocean City, Maryland, and parts of upstate New York and the Northeast that are now considered more working class or lower middle class travel destinations were originally, when they were first constructed, designed to attract the elite. And just as the elite moved to other places, those down marketed to maintain tourism or just decay over time and not maintaining these places. The only northeastern city that fits the Pearl Drift narrative is the Poconos Mountains in northeastern Pennsylvania. But that's not even a perfect fit. That was more of a short getaway in the era when like air travel and long distance driving was not really as viable. So if people wanted a weekend getaway, it needed to be relatively closer, especially for New Yorkers. Now the places that fit this category are more in the south. First, when I go to Tennessee, we have Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, which is near like the Great Smoky Mountains. People often say this place is kind of tacky, filled with Ripley's Believe It or Not style tourist attractions, and it oftentimes does attract a more working class or lower middle class tourist. But as travel has gotten more expensive, particularly air travel in more high-end resort areas, and as the growth of Nashville and Charlotte as cities has had a lot of people looking more for local road trips, Gatlinburg has been a big winner as it's between two of the fastest growing metro areas in the U.S. and close to one of the most visited national parks in America. Outside of the mountains part of Tennessee, the main other Pearl Drift travel destination in the south is known as the Redneck Riviera. It's mostly northwestern Florida. It includes cities like Pensacola, Destin, Panama City, etc. And some people argue it also includes places such as Gulfport and Biloxi and Mississippi and Mobile and Alabama. But this is generally the closest beach for a lot of southeastern Americans and this throughout the South and states such as Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, northern Louisiana, Tennessee, and parts of Missouri. I went here once, and showing up there as somebody without a southern accent and not wearing any SEC football garb, you got strange stares and you got some disparaging remarks once people found out you were from California. It was a very interesting vibe, to say the least. The beaches here are warm in the summer, but they are not really to the same level of development or the same level of sophistication as beaches further south in Florida. And this originally was a more working class destination, but really starting, say, like in the 1990s, it's gotten increasingly more developed to include hotels and resorts and vacation homes that cater to a more higher income crowd. It's a classic example of how you see a destination originally more targeted towards lower classes start to attract the middle classes as economic development and social mobility trends have changed. In Texas, there's one main Pearl Drift travel destination, which has become rapidly one of the most popular vacation destinations overall in the United States with the growth of the state of Texas, and that is South Padre Island, which is in the far south of Texas near the Brownsville and the Mexican border. It's a barrier island that only has about 2,000 people in its permanent population, but gains multiple of that during its tourist destination. Originally, it was known as a cheap local getaway for South Texans and a popular spring break destination, but over the last few years, they have attempted to upbrand to attract more middle class tourists and to build more luxury resorts versus just solely more affordable. And the other one I'm going to discuss in the southeast is Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which originally started as a more working class tourist destination because it was the closest beach driving distance to a lot of the northeast US that's still fairly warm to swim in terms of ocean water and like the fall and the spring. Myrtle Beach is a popular spring break destination known for having some of the most affordable golf in the United States. And so, but it's also kind of the reputation of being tacky to a certain degree. And over time, Myrtle Beach has It's attracting a more conventionally middle-class crowd. This isn't just an American issue. This is a global issue. So we're going to start with the Caribbean. The most noticeable to me is the Dominican Republic. Like as recently as like 15 years ago, I never really heard of anybody really going on vacation to the Dominican Republic. And traditionally had a reputation to be kind of more of a passport bro type place, or more of a place where New Yorkers would go to a cheap bachelor party or a weekend getaway type place. But it's now adopted more interest among middle class people, and especially as other Caribbean islands such as the Bahamas and the Cayman and Barbados and even Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands have gotten more expensive. The Dominican Republic has become a relative bargain, and so as a result, it's attracting an increased amount of tourists, particularly from what would be considered the more working class or college students or people who were priced out of previous tourist destinations.
The other major example of Prole drift in Latin America and the Caribbean area is Cancun. Cancun has always kind of been more of a weekend getaway, party seeking, college spring break, somewhat working class getaway destination, which upscaled for a little bit in the early 2000s, but then once Tulum, which is a few miles to the south, and Playa del Carmen started to develop and attract the more upscale, high-end party crowd and just tropical vacation goers of middle and upper middle class background, and rising crime rates, particularly around the resorts in Cancun, also kind of confirm the shift away of money travel from Cancun to Tulum to the south.
We're going to move on to Europe, and there are a few destinations that stand out. The United Kingdom, there's a city, Blackpool, which is popular weekend getaway for working class people from Manchester and Liverpool, and has since started to get interest from Londoners in more recent years. Others who previously thought of them as middle class, as the UK's economy has struggled, and there are more traditional vacation spots such as Brighton locally, Cornwall, or Scotland, or if you're off the UK, like vacations to some of the nicer parts in Spain and southern France have gotten more expensive. Blackpool has become an increasingly more attractive alternative. And outside of the UK and continental Europe, we're going to go to Spain. And a lot of the Spanish coast has kind of become like originally like a place for lower income British retirees to vacation, but it has broadly expanded. The most notable areas that kind of fit this Prole drift vibe on the Spanish coast are Mijas, near Marbella and Malaga on one end. On the other end is a town called Benidorm, originally built as a retirement community for lower income British retirees. In the Balearic Islands, there's Ibiza, which started modern tourism as a party island for stag parties or college students or people who just want to rave. And as, again, other vacation destinations have gotten more expensive and Ibiza is trying to expand its demographic, they're trying to re-cater it to attract middle and upper middle class people who've heard it's a fun but don't want to participate in the club life. And it's not quite as expensive as higher end parts of Majorca. It's become one of these more Prole drift travel destinations. Other real spots in Europe are Central and Eastern Europe, with Prague kind of standing out as a city. I mean, when I used to always ask people why they went to Prague, some people would talk about like the Charles Bridge and some of the nice architecture and culture, but it really came down to it. A lot of the people go here mainly because it had very cheap beer. It still has that reputation to this day. It's known as the stag party capital of Europe, especially for British tourists. And it is still relatively an affordable place, and it's become more popular as previous cities that maybe people will go to instead, such as Vienna, have gotten more expensive. Further east, the Black Sea coast, which is kind of regarded as an affordable beach destination. The most notable town, really, in this area is a place called Sunny Beach in Bulgaria, But the whole Black Sea coast in Bulgaria and Romania has become a travel destination impacted by Prole drift. Other parts of coastal Europe, particularly the Mediterranean destinations, whether it's Italy, Croatia, Spain, Portugal, and the Greek islands, have gotten more expensive. You've seen more demand from people who previously wouldn't have considered it, are now going to the Black Sea coast because they're priced out of previous destinations. Last but not least, we got to talk about Asia. And Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, kind of fits a lot of the classic themes for Prole travel destinations. One, it's affordability. Like Southeast Asia has some of the lowest living costs in the world. And as a result, it's because of that, it has a reputation of attracting budget travelers, whether it's backpackers just exploring the region, passport bros, or the digital nomad crowd that frequently take extended visits or outright move to this region of the world. Or it's just people who want to get a lot of value financially for their travels. But that affordable doesn't necessarily mean Prole drift. Prole drift really means that people who are coming here more because they would normally, people of their socioeconomic background would go someplace else. Incomes for Asian tourism as a whole, but also has to do with just greater awareness because of the internet of how affordable Southeast Asia is. In China, the most notable one is Hainan. Hainan, they've tried to rebrand as the Hawaii of China, but it hasn't caught on. Wealthy, upper middle class, and above Chinese tourists prefer other beach destinations. Bali, whether that is going to Europe, whether that is going to Japan, or a variety of other places. Hainan has just been more of a working class or lower middle class destination. It hasn't grown beyond that yet. The other destination that stands out in this region is Thailand. You have Chiang Mai, which a lot of people go mainly because it's affordable. It's known for being possibly the most affordable city in the world. And so as a result, it draws a lot of people. There is some nice nature there and some history, but the main driver, it seems to me, of why it's become increasingly popular is its relative affordability. And then outside of that, it's mainly the coast along the Gulf of Thailand, south of Bangkok down to Phuket, has generally become a more Prole drift kind of place. This region historically attracts a lot of vice tourism and backpackers. Thailand is known for affordable tourism, and as Bangkok has gotten more expensive, Thai tourism is moving away from Bangkok more to these other destinations. What are your thoughts? Do you think these are Prole drift destinations, or am I being unfair? Or are there Prole drift travel destinations I'm missing that you think should be on here? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.